Welcome. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Spotlight. Tonight's special guest stands in New York City's history as one of the founding voices of the Nuyorican poetry movement, Jesús Papoleto Meléndez. Papoleto is a poet whose work is a powerful reflection of New York City, especially of East Harlem, where he grew up. He is also a playwright, teacher, and activist. His literary work has been published in multiple anthologies since 1972, including Nuyorican Poetry, an anthology of Puerto Rican words and feeling, edited by the legendary Miguel Algarín and Miguel Piñero. His honors include the Artist for Community Enrichment Award, a joint fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts and Combined Arts of San Diego, and Pregones Theater's Master Artist Award, and many others. And of course, there is his formidable collection of Hey Yo Soy, 40 years of Nuyorican street poetry, adapted as a music theater production by Rosalba Rolón and the Smart Guevara, and which our theater ensemble, myself included, performed at the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater. Join us as Papoleto speaks about his artistic journey and his work with Pregones Puerto Rican Traveling Theater. Enjoy.
My name is Jesús Papoleto Meléndez, and I am a poet and playwright. I first realized that I was a poet when I had like a surreal experience as I was ending my teenage years. I was about 19, and it was a snowy evening in New York, and I was about to cross the street, and I was going to jump over it when I saw a piece of the fire hydrant, protruding from it. And so that stopped me because I was going to bang into the fire hydrant. I gave the fire hydrant like a second glance, when I realized, when it stopped me. When I looked at it the second time, it didn't appear like a fire hydrant, because it was in the snow and all of that. It just had a surreal kind of look to it. And it didn't look like anything particular, but it didn't look like a fire hydrant, It like had a thing of its own. And I found that interesting in my mind. So as I continued walking across the street, I said, yeah, I must be a poet. The thought actually occurred to me. Now that's coupled with when my English tutor discovered my poetry a few years earlier when I was 16. She said, you know what these are? And I said, yeah, they're the things that I write. And she said, no. And so I got contentious with her because I thought she was denying that I had written them, because that had already happened with another teacher of mine, aquí at Junior High School 117, which is now Tito Puente, but it was Jefferson Junior High School. I had a teacher that accused me of plagiarism, because I wrote a thing on dead presidents. And so when she told me no, I was already defensive about my literature. And, I said, yeah, I wrote these. And she said, yes, but do you know what they are? And I said, yeah, they're what I write. And she said, they're poems. And that took me aback. I said, no, they can't possibly be poems. And she said, why? And I said, because only dead people write poetry. And I'm like, 17. Only dead people write poetry. And she said, I remember that, Meredith Wright, Mary. I remember that because, it was shocking to me that I would have the audacity to write poetry, without being a poet. I think that's an interesting, naive concept, but it's wholesome in its naivety. I think that what happens with passion when you're younger is you may have it, but not understand why, or the philosophical reasons why it might be an innate passionate feeling. But when you get older, you're able to put your finger on certain things. So I think that I've always been concerned with justice. Injustice has always bothered me. Like when we had to go to the hospital, yo soy de la 111. Right? You got to say that in Spanish. I lived across the street from the firehouse on 11th, between 2nd and 3rd. And it was a very, very Puerto Rican block, con el piragüero. So there were a lot of occasions that we had to go to Mount Sinai Hospital. In those days, a lot of people don't know this, but they would always talk to us in English. And a lot of people didn't understand English, not even numbers. And they called us by numbers then. They'd give you a number and tell you, sit there, 69, and everybody is going like that to each other to figure out who has 69. It's like la loteria, except it's in English. So I would go around and tell people their numbers. I go, no, eres tú. And I didn't know much Spanish because my brain it was an English thinking thing, And my mother would always call me el beriguao, because I was always nosing into other people's business. But I would tell people, I would interpret for some people, from English to Spanish as best I could. Today I find all the time, but I didn't know it when I was young. See, now, like I said, I can put my finger on it. The ironic moment. And I put my finger, the ironic moment. Inspiration and imagination. One lights the other. Imagination comes from memory. So the more you know, the more imaginative you can be. Whether you know things that are true or imaginary, you know what I mean? But the more you know, the more imaginative you can be. But what picks up the pen is the ironic moment. Like in the poem, Subway, Sleeper Car, Sleeper. But it's about a homeless guy sleeping in a train, and I had to go to teach that day, so it's rush hour in the morning, and I'm wondering why half the train is full, one car, half is full and half is empty. It's because there's this homeless guy there. And that's ironic. See, so that's the moment to pull out your pen. That's the ironic moment, which usually has to do with something incongruent between reality and justice. This is Papolitico. It's a collection of 18 poems of mine that are of political persuasion. And I've written them over the years. So I'm putting together now, the last 3 books I published are books that I'm putting together of stuff that I've written a long time ago. And I know that people haven't seen my poetry very much on the page, which I encourage you to do. I think it's fun to read my poetry. I wanted to start with some quotes from people, so I quoted myself, which is like when people say, well, what is poetry really about? And I go, well, poetry is about empathy. Poetry is always about empathy. In Casey at the Bat, the poem does not want Casey to strike out. In The Charge of the Light Brigade, the poem does not want the League to die. I put that dedication into words here, and it goes like this. This collection is dedicated to the belief that the nature of poetry is the universal empathetic expression of the spirit's suffering, a human experience. Because I think that's what it is. I've lived in enough experiences. I've been with people who pass away, and I hold their hand like a gatekeeper. My mother, and Reverendo Pedro Pietri, my brother, my father, just Pedro's sister, as they transition, I happen to be there. And I know that we are spirit. We're just having a human experience. And we need, and poetry is empathetic to that reality.
It was the first place I worked when I moved to New York City as a young artist. It's one of the only places in New York where I can explore my artistic side and my culture.
We are so proud to be recognized as one of the leading Latinx theater ensembles in the nation. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being part of our family.
Hey Yo, I would call, as a book, I would call it seminal for me, because it allows the reader to see my roots. This is a book composed of my first 3 books of poetry that I wrote. This is Street Poetry and Other Poems, which was published in 1972. Yeah, 1972. This is why it doesn't like to leave the house. You know, but there it is, 1972, a hardcover book. I pasted the hardcover to it. You know, yeah, okay, I promise I won't take you out anymore. I have another book that says I ain't going nowhere anymore. It's too fragile. And this one here, which I printed this book in printing class at Horace Mann. When I used to go to Horace Mann there, and they had a printing machine. It's a linotype machine, so you can actually touch and feel the text, you know, the letters on here that are pressed. You know, and I inked up the whole thing. I did the whole thing by myself. And the other book, which I don't have a copy of, Casting Long Shadows, are the 3 books that are put together because all of them were 40 years old. One was 41, one was 42, and one was 43 in 2012. So we decided we were going to reprint Street Poetry and Other Poems, but then my publisher found out I had 2 other books, so we put them all together. And we put them in the order in which they were published. And then we sandwiched them between 2 other poems, a lead poem to start off the book because we wanted to start the book off with a bang, like books should begin. You know, you open up the first book and say, oh, I want to continue reading this, you know? So we made a prologue and an epilogue. And in the prologue, we that's where Hey Yo appears. Hey Yo was written in California when I lived between California and Mexico in 1992. See, so all those poems that are 40 years old, and this one was written in 1992. And then In a Grain of Sand, which was also written in California, was written in the year 2010. So we sandwiched those 3 books between 2 newer poems so that the reader could see my growth as a writer. Could say, after all of this stuff that this guy did as a kid, he's writing poetry as an adult, you know, more mature person, been through a lot. And his style, my style of cascadence, which I developed because I didn't know punctuation. I didn't know how to use punctuation when I was a kid. So I saw some poetry by, with Donnell Lee and E.E. Cummings, and Amiri Baraka, and Lawrence Ferlinghetti, A Coney Island of the Mind, and their movement on the page, and that excited me. So I began to use space on the page like a canvas and create the pauses that I needed, that a comma would create. Pregones is community theater in action. You know, just like the Puerto Rican traveling theater, in the tradition of that, Pregones, in which, you know, you're now there too, at that, community action theater. And this community theater in a location, you know, that has comfortable seats, that's welcoming, you know. We still need theater to go out into the street, you know. We're all, you know, like Lorca, you know, we're all out there, you know, trying to, you know, because art needs to not be institutionalized so much where it can't walk out into the street. The whole period of Pregones giving me an award like that, a lifetime award to do some of my work, I really appreciated that. I needed it financially at the time, really. And also, you know, you never know how hurt your ego is until something happens to it, you know? Either it gets bruised or it gets rubbed. You know, one or the other will do it. And that was a good rub, you know, a good spiritual rub for me. So thank you very much. I appreciated that. So it was exciting for me to watch. And, you know, I came to every performance. I don't know who does that, but I did because I really wanted to. I was enjoying it. Plus, my friends were going to see it, and I wanted to be there with them. Even my family, which rarely goes to see anything I do, you know, or happens to me. But yeah, it was exciting for me.
thought a happy thought, and it slipped from thought to smile, and from smile to giggle. People stare.
Remember, we met here at the beginning to have our table readings and discuss the poems. And I had no idea what you guys, how you would put this together or what would be selected. But most of the poems in the Hey Yo production did come from Hey Yo. I think a couple did not. But that was okay because I had given you an array of poems. I was surprised by the selections because I would not have, me personally, would not have selected a couple of them. So their presentation, their realization was interesting to me. One of them was, I forget the one, where everybody is like, the whole the wall set and everything, and everybody's sticking their heads out in from different places.
Hey yo! Hey yo! Hey yo yo yo! Hey yo yo! Hey yo yo yo! Hey yo yo!
The music was forget about it, like it was really like a Broadway musical for me. The two things that stuck out to me, the production generally just blew my mind. I was very orgulloso to be there, sit there and watch that and watch people appreciate it. I think some people had an idea that I would be reciting, so that, no, I want you to see other people. I like that, to see other people interpret my work. It's a nice tribute. What surprised me the most, or what I liked, I liked Hey Yo, the treatment of Hey Yo. That was fun at the end, how they musicalized that, vocalized it themselves, and it became, it reminded me of my youth hanging out. Even though that poem wasn't written in that frame, it was written, like I had been to Native American sweats, and I had hung out with Native Americans when I wrote Hey Yo. That's why it's got Hey Yo, 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 yo. It's what it's about. But yet the interpretation on the stoop was interesting to me. It was, very, homey. And What Love Kills, which is the poem about the guy that kills his girlfriend at a beauty pageant, and she's a contestant, and he murders her. And you guys, so I call it the poem in red because you bled the stage in a red wash of light. Yeah, it had a Kurt Weill feeling to it, the dun, dun, dun. It sounded like a damn nightmare, But it was like, it was just so beautiful and moving, and the whole audience was like, really, I like to make audiences cry, okay? I like to make them laugh and cry, but, to me, life is a cosmic irony. Being a poet is a lifestyle. It's not the fact that you can write. The poem is out there waiting for you to discover it. So it's not about you. It's about the poem. And I think that we have to be careful now because there's this, when we were doing things, when the whole Nuyorican movement, we were a voice for our people. And I'm not saying that we're not that still, but I remember when I hung out with Native Americans in Arizona, in Four Corners, Arizona, hung out with Hopi and Dene people. And I asked the medicine man one time, what is it that protects the brave in battle? It's not the warrior, because they don't call themselves warriors, they call themselves braves. And they're braves because they're protecting their property, belongs to them. Okay, they're not warriors, they're not going out conquering, they're defending. So I said, well, what is it that protects the brave in battle? You know, basically, I don't give a, I'm going to go out and vanquish or be vanquished. One or the other attitude, right? And he said, intent. Intent. And so I thought about it, and when natives, if you hang out with Native Americans, when they say something, a lot of times it keeps you wondering all day about what that one sentence, the intent. And it is your intention that either blesses you or condemns you in whatever activity or endeavor, you're about to undertake. I know that in my generation, we were a voice for our people because of what was happening. You couldn't complain if you felt discriminated against when you went to get an apartment and the landlord said he had already rented the apartment, although the Daily News just came out an hour ago with the ad announcing the apartment, and you're the first one to get the Daily News. You took it off the truck, so you knew he was lying to you, but he could say, so what? And there was nothing you could do, but movements like, Evelina Antonetti, United Bronx Parents, and people like that, and Pantoja, and all these people that that did things for our community to make it more intelligent, more cohesive, and stuff like that. Those people are really speaking for us, and those are the changes that we now enjoy. That way, if you go get an apartment, and you feel discriminated against, there is something you can do about it, and so forth. So we did that. Our generation and the generation that parented us did that. And so we can't forget those things because they were legitimate sacrifices. And poetry was part of that. And our art has been part of that, and it continues to be part of that. So we cannot be concerned with branding ourselves for commercial purposes because we're not about, our struggle is not commercial. It's political, it's social, historical, traditional, And we can have fun with that. But I'm not going to stop being a poet, you know what I mean? And besides, I could do that anyway. I've been a poet for 50 years, But I'm saying it's not my aspiration to use my poetry to become an actor. It's poetry is always advocacy, throughout history. So, it's not a beauty contest. Again, the quote about empathy, if a poem is only about you, then it's empathetic to you. And therefore, that's the saving grace that makes it poetry. Otherwise, you're just having a conversation with yourself. This is my latest book, Borracho, Very Drunk, Love Poems and Other Acts of Madness. It took me 50 years to write this book. I really love this book. I'll tell you why. Because it took me 50 years to write it. I really thought about this book. I've always wanted to write a book about love poems. I feel every poet should have a book about love poems. Just that. Talk about everything else, like, cover those bases, fine, but then one day just talk about love. And so these are poems that have my relationships that I've observed, things that I just know, like Two Women Sitting is about two women into each other, waiting for the train, kissing. And it had nothing to do with me, but it's them, you see, so. But then, I have poems, like What Love Kills is in here. In Afternoon Love is a poem about me wanting to be in love, with someone, desiring love. So it's a very telling book, it's slash your heart open and, so. And I like it. It's translated by Amneri Morales into Spanish, my girlfriend, and she, it's beautiful in Spanish too. So, and the cover, I gotta say, is by Jorge Soto Sanchez, who passed away in 1988, and he was a beautiful Puerto Rican painter. It's okay, don't worry about that. He's a beautiful Puerto Rican painter, Jorge Soto Sanchez. And I'm glad that, he gives me the chance to use his photograph via his widow. Thank you.
handsome lady rides a handsome man in a handsome cab drawn by a handsome horse.
Handsome, 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 handsome.
With his handsome hair in the handsome air, blessed by handsome stars in a handsome night, where fly handsome birds. Through handsome clouds to sing their handsome songs that bring the handsome boys to the handsome girls with the handsome eyes, to the handsome rooms with the handsome curtains and the handsome sheets beneath which handsome madness occurs. And handsome madness to see my handsome dream, awaken a handsome morning to see a handsome face and touch a handsome hand and have a handsome coffee and have a handsome toast and share a handsome laugh and walk in a handsome street and in a handsome hour to smell a handsome flower and recall that handsome moment. To see a handsome lady who rides a handsome man in her handsome cab, who doffs his handsome hat quite handsomely.
The role of a poem is to expose itself to the poet so that the poet can write it down. The poem always exists. The poem always exists. It's just waiting to be written. The poem's attitude about being written is that it doesn't have the dexterity to pick up a pen, so it needs to inspire someone who can. When I say the poem always exists, if there's a poem about injustice, that injustice has existed. You see, if it's a poem about a flower, that flower has existed. You see, and therefore the poem it embodies itself. We're like be woke. You know what I mean? Well, the poem is always woke. It's always woke. It's just waiting for you to wake up and see it.